Welcome to Delightfully Dysfunctional, a podcast about navigating the emotions of the human condition and the challenges that come with it. I'm Kaylani Persian Mason, a psychotherapist and life coach with James Timmons, an ever-curious human. This is not a replacement for mental health therapy. Please seek out mental health care if that's what you're needing. This is an opportunity for self-healers to dive deep and understand more about themselves. All right, we are so excited to have our guest today, Wysteria Edwards. Wysteria is an educator and she is also an author, and she just has so much passion for educating, for just being a loving and present person in a child's life, and for the work that Mr. Fred Rogers has done for us, who is just such a favorite companion that I know I had growing up. I have such fond memories of Fred Rogers. So we're excited to have her here today. Thank you so much, Wysteria.
You're welcome. I appreciate being here. Thank you.
Yeah, I see the letters BA next to your name. Does that stand for badass?
Yes,
Okay.
I'm a badass.
Okay.
It's probably more indicative of all the trouble I get myself in talking, but yes, no, I have a bachelor's in education and then elementary education with a 412 endorsement in drama.
Okay.
And then I also have my master's in reading and emergent reading and literacy. So one of my favorite sounds in the world is when children are learning how to read.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like unlocking this code for them. So I have taught every grade, K through 12, but in some capacity, but definitely love the beginning.
Are you still kinder?
I am still kinder, yes,
yeah.
on purpose. Every year I kind of am like, but it's like that first month is a little grueling. And then after that, we kind of
Find your flow.
We tame the beast, yes.
Yeah.
So, there's a little bit of I need my mommy type of thing and an exchange of, partnership and ownership and all that stuff. But it's really about creating safety. So,
and you're gearing up for that because the school year is
Yes.
about to begin.
It
And having
is.
I was an elementary school counselor. I've
Right.
mentioned that before. But I realized we had a dual language program, and I realized that those dual language kindergarten teachers, like one of them was gone, and I had to sub. And holy smokes, like half the kids don't know what you're saying. They're all asking for mommy. It's herding cats. Now I'm
Yes.
herding cats, and I have to try and say it in a different language. I don't know. I was like, wow.
My friends that do that are amazing. And I think it's funny because I even have a 4th grade teacher that I work with, and she just had to sub for my class for like 30 minutes one morning. And she wrote on the form, she was like, epic fail. I suck. I never want to teach kindergarten. Sorry about what I left behind. And I finally had to call her and be like, "Are you okay?"
Did they traumatize you?
And it's funny because I often have to remind myself, like, what I do is hard. But when you're in what you feel is like your groove and your passion and your calling, then it's like, it's very seamless. But then I come back and I'm like, why was this so hard when things aren't done? And people are like, they just lived. Right?
Yeah.
So as far as working with young children, it's absolutely imperative that we are a solid base, which goes into the idea of attachment, that children need a secure base to be able to return to that person knowing that I will be safe, I will be comforted, I will get what I need, and then I can go out and explore the world. Well, when that person is gone, which is their teacher, it's absolute chaos, and they're looking and they're vying for not only just the things I can get away with, right, but also security and structure, because children will push until they find a boundary. And so that often becomes a free-for-all. So that's probably what you experienced as well. And then you have the different language.
And it was the beginning of the year.
And when people are like, oh, can you just take some time off? I'm like, you have no idea how freaking hard the beginning of the year is. And so it's just not acceptable.
I have a lot of teacher friends whom I love and adore. And I know that for 9 months out of the year, I probably won't see them. So I just have so much respect for teachers and for, all of the people that work at a school, to be honest. Like, it is just a well-oiled machine, and it's a lot of work, and it's so much heart and just the love of working with kids.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's an exchange, right? So it's I always have to remind myself, like, every child in my classroom is someone's entire world. And so when people are upset, they come to you and they're like, help me. Right? Because they want you to see them, but that's also, they want to know that you see their child. And so I often tell myself it's not a great conference session if somebody doesn't cry. Usually, and it's not because I'm telling them that their child is horrible, but usually I'm telling them how much I love their child, how incredible their child is, and what's unique about their child. And people will cry just hearing that, because then they know, okay, she's got this. So I've had repeat parents where they're, super helicopter over the top in my face at the beginning. And then by the next one, they're like, I trust you. Do whatever you need to do to get it done. Right. By the second or third, they're like, we'll see you if you need us. So it's that exchange and trust factor.
Right. We jumped right in, but I want to get to know a little bit more about you, the person too. Like, what are the things you enjoy doing? Tell us about your family and your life outside of your passions too.
Well, I've been married for 25 years to a nuclear chemist. And so together we have one complete brain, right? So he's like...
Yeah, you're the creative.
Yes. And he often compares our relationship to bowling balls, like a bowling lane, and then those, the gutters. So he's like the gutter or the when you put the what do you call it? The little...
The bumpers?
Bumpers. He's kind of that person that bumps me back to where I need to be. And he often will say, can we wait a minute? Can we just stop? And I get super pissed because I'm like, because I want him to just go with me. And then oftentimes when I heed what he's saying, it's like, oh yeah, you were right. I often tell him he's right and he rarely tells me I'm right. So it's a partnership, I guess, in that way. But so we've been married for 25 years.
And you guys just went on a big trip.
We did. For our 25th anniversary, we went to Scotland and Ireland. We are absolutely in love with everything BBC. And so we love the show Shetland. And so I mentioned to him, hey, we should go to Shetland. And like the next day we had his expense account. And of course, when we came into Shetland, he needed to play the music so that way we had. So it was just really... was so amazing because you don't realize how much your nervous system is on this really hyper aroused state. And when I got to Scotland or to Shetland, especially, you take 12 hours on a ferry all the way out into the middle of nowhere overnight before you can get there. And so there's like I think the ratio is like 450 sheep to one person.
Oh my gosh.
There's all these just lambs everywhere.
You're just surrounded by sheep.
And there's nothing. As far as... you can't hear anything but the wind. And then it didn't...
What a way to just reconnect with each other and but nature.
Well, yeah. I felt like we were like hobbits. Like we would wake up, have breakfast, take a nap. Then we would go for a drive, come back, have lunch, take another nap, second nap. And then we would wake up and the sun doesn't set until like 10:30 at night right now. So
you have so much energy too. The sun just like makes you feel like it's so much earlier.
I couldn't stop sleeping, and I was like, "This is so weird." But then it was one of those things where I realized,
a time change,
yeah. But I also realized like how much we crave rest and what real rest is, and I felt like I took the deepest breath of my life, and so
wow. As a mother of a toddler who woke up at 3:30 this morning and didn't really fall restfully back. I very much relate to the idea of real rest. Yeah.
Yeah, you're in the thick of it right now.
Right. I felt like I was going to be wiping butts and filling sippy cups my entire life. And now my boys, I have two boys. One is 22 and going to Central and university, and then the other one is 20, and he's about to take his LSAT to get into law school.
Oh, dang!
In Nashville this next weekend. So everybody cross
good
your
luck.
Fingers
Good luck. We're crossing our fingers for Ben.
But yeah, he's working his little hiney off for that. So
wow, what pride! What pride you must have for seeing these humans.
A lot of
develop.
brains. Sounds like
right. I think being a mother is really the most humbling, or parent in general is the most humbling experience. I had no idea how incredibly selfish I was until I had children, as well as my greatest failures have been wrapped up in my mothering because, and as we talk about attachment in my project and also my business, I think it's really important that we look at things from a place that we recognize that if we put good things in there, regardless of how fractured we are or the traumas that we bring into working with our own children and raising our children and being married to another human being or being partnered, I think it's imperative that we give ourselves a lot of compassion and grace.
Yeah.
And I remember when I started researching and using Fred Rogers' work, my therapist was like, you need to make sure you give yourself a lot of grace. Because when I entered therapy, I was there for behavioral addiction. So for me, I was not only healing my own attachment and trauma, but I was also reconciling the years that I had disassociated and abandoned my own children emotionally because I could not cope and I could not relate to how to be a mother. And so that ties in. So in fact, writing the book is it was one of the hardest things I've ever done, not just because writing a book is difficult, but honestly, it was more about revisiting most of my deepest pain and regret as a parent. And I'm able to apply it in the classroom, you know, with fervor and vigor but I'm often reminded of all the ways that I did not give my children a lot more good that they needed. And so, and as a whole with developmental trauma, that's how I like to define it, is the fact that developmental trauma is not just the things we think about as traumatic, but it's not getting enough of the good things we needed.
Yeah.
So it's where were we ostracized, ignored, abandoned, belittled, parentified, where we were meant to be in a surrogate spouse, right?
I like that description because I think oftentimes when I bring up developmental trauma, for people who don't understand trauma, they view that as it had to be something really, 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 really bad.
Right. And so,
little T trauma.
Yeah. There's the like and just more complex PTSD of just constantly over time.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that is what I was diagnosed with, was CPTSD, which is still very
it's a
unknown.
newer term,
right.
and it's not even in the DSM. But
What is that? What does it stand for?
Complex.
It just means complex post-traumatic stress
Oh,
disorder
okay.
versus the way that we typically think about PTSD, like let's say a veteran is
Yeah.
from an event where there was a loud sound and I have that association. Complex post-traumatic stress disorder is something that has happened over a long period of time. So it's usually developmental,
Yeah.
where it's like
Body-based beliefs, right?
Yeah.
Narratives. For instance, you know, people are always going to leave me. I'm going to be rejected. I cannot fail. Or I will not try because I might fail.
a lot of core beliefs.
Big time beliefs about who you are, and everything around you is confirming that. So you're looking for it.
Through that lens,
Yeah.
you're kind of finding in those reasonings, and there can be a lot of self-sabotaging behavior, of which we've been talking about. In general, that's been coming up.
Right. And I think I look at it as life of 1,000 paper cuts, right? So you and then you band-aid it with whatever you feel like numbs it. And then you get cut on top of that again. And so it's like layer upon layer.
Yeah.
And you have to go back and heal the core, which I believe firmly is insecure attachment, where it's our first heartbreak as a child. And so after that, everything else is a symptom of that. So even all adversity, all violence, all of it can be traced back to some type of broken connection, how we give and receive love.
Yeah.
And so when we look at adverse childhood experiences, which we talk about it constantly in education, they'll give us a big, huge, and I remember, you remember this too. You might have even given the presentation as a counselor, but it's basically, these are the tics that if you children, the more that you have that you have the higher possibility that you're going to have all these different other issues, right? Obesity, heart disease, teen pregnancy, it just keeps going on and on and on. But
that the more trauma you have, the more as a child in developmental years, that basically it's just confirming complex trauma, that then it is more likely that you will either fall into certain categories where you will have behavioral addictions, like unhealthy relationships and kind of love addiction, or that you might end up in prison, that you might have a mental illness, substance abuse, which are all very escapism things. The emotional pain that I feel is too intense, that's where most addiction is born from.
Right,
I need to escape and numb through something.
Yeah, and that's exactly what happened to me, because I was fine when I had secure attachment with my husband, but then when I became a mother, I did not have. That's where your attachment wound comes from, is with your biological or your caregiver, right? So especially your mother. So oftentimes I'll ask people if they're like, I don't know what kind of attachment I have. I say, tell me about your relationship with your mom, and they're always like, oh, and then that automatically creates about 3 different conversations that I can have with people that and so what happens with that, and they're like, well, it was a long time ago, and I'm like, well, then tell me about your relationship right now. And it will be indicative most of the time of their attachment style and how they relate to the world. And then I didn't even get that until my counselor looked me in the face, because I was like, why am I self-sabotaging? Why am I putting all of my life at risk? Why am I doing this when I have an amazing husband, I have beautiful children,
Yeah.
I have a great career. Why am I doing this? And she said, you have insecure attachment. And it was like silence, like crickets. Like I was like, what are you talking about? And it was like she was speaking another language to me until I really started to unpack that. But when you heal, it's like healing an onion, right? You have to heal layers. And so the things that pushed me in there were things like narcissistic abuse and the way that I had tethered to abusive people and that sort of thing. So we had to kind of clear that away first. And then we started to go back to the core of the child that I had been. And you have to be willing to go back through your story and make a linear narrative, because trauma slices it into pieces and you leave parts of yourself in traumatic experiences as a child. And I often think of developmental trauma as a child being left alone in a story that they can't name, articulate, they can't ponder it, and they can't bless it because it really doesn't make any sense to them. And they didn't get enough, right? So that's what I try to do as an educator or as a mother now or a friend, is I either try to just hold space for that person and be a place where they can kind of process it, or I give them words for it, or I name it.
Yeah.
And so because we have to name trauma, we have to say, this hurt me, this was traumatic, this was not okay. And that doesn't mean that we don't love the perpetrator. We might not, but if it's a parent, we feel like that is actually
Feels like you're not allowed. Yeah.
Yes. And we say, well, my parents did the best job they knew how to do. Not always.
Yeah.
Some people are just selfish. And I made some seriously selfish choices. So I've had to ask my children to say out loud to me, you failed me.
Yeah.
And my oldest, it killed him when I said, say it out loud to me. We were in the car. And I said, just say, Mom, you failed me. And he got like 2 of the words out, and then he just started sobbing. And I was like, say it. Your soul needs to hear you say it. Because oftentimes it's the child that just needs to have the adult us show up and own it and like say, that wasn't okay.
Yeah.
And then
that is so, actually, I just want to pause there because I had a really big conversation with my mom this summer where it had gotten to that point where I think I'd realized there are conversations I might not be able to have with her, and I had to mourn that she might not be able to hear what I'm saying. And in that, like we'd kind of cooled down and taken a few days and then spoke to each other again. And although we weren't able to get to the core of it, we could get to a place where she could at least say, it's like you're speaking Greek and I'm speaking a different language. And we could talk around it, kind of like that onion. We could talk around it enough for it to be like, I could accept that she truly loves me. I know that.
Yeah.
And she is not built the same way.
That is the hard part.
Yeah.
And accepting that, and I can see that's painful for you.
Oh, it is, because I do want so badly to be like, it means I have to let go of this idea of a relationship that I've had or that she won't get to fully know me.
Yeah.
There's a whole layer, a thick layer of conversation that feels like it might be difficult. But her just accepting that and me accepting that in that moment and us knowing like it's not about our lack of love for one another, it was very healing. Like it gave me that sense.
Yeah, I think it's radical acceptance. And I think, but the hard part is when you do the work and you want that other person to heal with you. You want that person to be at a place where they can receive or go deeper. And it's just...
You can't force that healing on someone.
And I also have had moments where, with my own mother, I had to emancipate myself and actually cut her off for quite a while because I didn't feel as though I could do my own healing. And it was so enmeshed that... and there was a lot of, well, I miss the old Wisty. And I'm like, yeah, but that old Wisty was addicted. That old Wisty was sick.
Right.
And I'm not going to ever be able, and I would try to wear those old clothes
Yeah.
and be like,
it didn't fit anymore.
Made me physically sick. Like I would feel all the adrenaline and cortisol dump into my system and I would feel physically sick because I was like trying to make something work that doesn't work anymore. And we're at this place now where it's really hard. Like we're trying to kind of we're not rebuilding. I think we're reestablishing that I love you, but it's never going to be the way it was.
Yeah, you have boundaries. Yeah.
Massive. And
Right.
I just recently did my own podcast about being stuck in stories and also boundaries and what that looks like. And especially with someone who, because I had anxious attachment. And so it's actually a form of covert sexual abuse, because what happens is a child is parentified. So there will be one parent that, you know, if you're thinking of like, what is it, an isosceles triangle where everything is equal? Is that what that one is? I can't
That's a
remember.
parallel.
That's,
Oh.
no. The regular.
I think it is isosceles.
Yeah, I was thinking
Really
obtuse.
cute-
Okay, go ahead.
cute- Oh,
Right?
obtuse.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry, I don't know. Don't ask me.
None of us. Yeah.
Basically, every
You're the
side
teacher.
is- basically, all I have to do is do triangle, and it's like, this is a triangle regardless of how many sides. That's as far as we go in kindergarten. That's it. But basically, a basic triangle, all three sides are equal, right? But in a relationship with a child in a parent set, regardless if it's same sex or if it's, to the man and a woman or whatever, there should be a smaller section between obviously the parents to the child, right? So, but what happens, it's that we actually swap that triangle, and a parent is closer to the child than they are to the spouse or the partner. And so what that does is that
I see that so common, because I mean, like I've been doing marriage counseling and really been diving in, and that loss of that attachment to the partner, which is the foundation of the family.
Huge.
Yeah,
And
that was my case. Go ahead.
Right, and it breeds a ton of contempt. So what happens is, I was growing up with a mother who was my buddy, who was always in my space. She would wear my clothes. She knew my friends, all that stuff. And she shared a lot of her trauma with me because she wanted to protect me, because the abuser was still around in our family. I mean, and logically it made sense to her. But the thing is that what it did is it abused me through her memories, as well as I felt like I had to protect my own mother from her emotional distress. And my father had contempt towards me because now I was taking the place of him being
Getting affection.
Yes. Yeah. Like if Wisty needed something, she was with me or whatever. But then she was also very distracted by her own pain as well as her own siblings. So, there was times of extreme hot and cold. So what that did is that trained my brain to think that what was arousing and what real love was is something that you're constantly working for, something that you can't give up on.
Yeah.
And people that will treat you like complete shit, but then they'll love you or they'll ignore you. And then it becomes a cycle in your brain. So what happens is, as I started to act out, I would tether myself to unavailable men or men who... And this is after I was married, where I ended up in full-blown love and sex addiction because of the fact that I was surrounded by a lot of really successful people in the theater community, where I was going back and forth. And I would tether to people who were abusers because they would actually activate in my brain
that mental
that arousal structure. Yes.
Right.
And so what it does is it also tweaks your view of sexuality. So you consider sexuality as intensity. So you confuse
the secrecy to
correct
all of that
all of it
intensifies
taboo.
it.
And my mom told me about sexual abuse, so that was taboo.
Yeah.
So it changed my arousal structure. It changed what I thought was just arousing in general. But then also it made me think that something was wrong because things were so right with my husband. He was so easy for me to love. He was calm. He didn't make me feel unsafe.
Yeah, it was like unfamiliar.
Yes. And so what that does is you have this panicked feeling of I'm going to lose, which is an avoidant person that is attached. Our biggest fear is that we are going to be abandoned or rejected.
Yeah.
Abandoned or rejected. So what happens is all of a sudden when I became a mother, I was terrified because I didn't feel like I could do it well. And it didn't make sense to me because for some reason I had this lie in my head that if I were an educator, I would become a good mother. I don't know where that came from, but I was like all this weird guilt.
Makes sense. Yeah.
And there's like a spirituality thing too, where like all the girls at our church were pregnant at the same time. And, we all had to be great mothers, and I hated it. I freaking hated being home at home with a baby. I had massive postpartum depression. I didn't feel like I could get medicated because I had so many crazy people in my family, and I didn't want to be one more person with mental illness. So it was like all
The
these
layers,
things.
all the
Yes,
layers.
all the layers.
The onion.
Well, thank you for that vulnerability.
Well,
That-
but it's part of the story. Because what happens is the biggest fear that I had was that, one, I would be left alone, and two, that I didn't deserve what I had because it was too easy. And then I equated it to being, it must be boring.
Yeah.
I must have missed out on something.
Gosh, it sounds like you had such like negative self-talk,
Well, yeah, that's where you get it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's all about
But look
those
at all this
body
work
base.
that you've done.
I know.
It's so fun.
Now
to
you're
hear
like
you,
a fire hose of wisdom.
fire
So-
hose of wisdom.
Yeah, there we go.
That will add that to the
Totally.
bottom of the badass.
That'll be
fire
my
hose of wisdom.
my little review. Of the, yeah. Well, there's one thing I kind of wanted to bring it to Fred
Yeah.
Rogers.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because there was like I did my own self work in the last couple of years, and one foundational thing. I don't even know if he said this, but I think he did. I think I heard it on the movie A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood. Which how do you feel about that movie? Do you like it?
It's a complicated movie for me.
Okay. Well, so
Segue.
yeah.
No, it's good. It's good.
So he says, there's a long quote that actually says this, but he says, all people are precious and all people have pain. And I remember hearing that idea, and it completely it allowed me to have self-compassion, but then it allowed me to have compassion to other people and really become like a curious, compassionate person, and so then that movie is really where I got most of my information about like the human side of Mr. Rogers. But yeah, it really felt like that was his whole worldview, where he viewed people as, no matter what their outward behaviors were, he saw like the humanness, and he knew that it was way deeper than what they're showing on the surface. And
I love the idea of just mistakes, humility, and vulnerability are just already just wrapped into the fabric of his ethos.
Yeah.
And and it seems like those are things that you've been able to apply to your life.
Yeah.
And I guess one thing that it was really highlighted, and I'm curious if anything that you learned from Fred Rogers maybe helped in this, but being more of like that caregiver in the school sense or work sense, but maybe struggling in motherhood, I can relate to that too.
Yeah.
Like, and I was like a nanny, and I felt like, and I had like 5 kids I'd nanny, and I'm like, oh, it's
I'm a
gonna be,
rock
and
star.
no, it's hard. It's harder.
No,
it's
freaking-
different. It's not the same. I mean, so I totally relate to that. And where as that caregiver personality, you can give so much compassion to others. Your heart pours out to your students, and yet providing that for yourself doesn't come as naturally.
Yeah. Well,
So
and that's
could both of you
no,
speak
go ahead,
to
go
that?
ahead, go ahead,
No,
go ahead.
I think it's really important. So fast forward, after I'd been in therapy for about 8 years, I had a little boy that entered my classroom who I call Blue Eyes in my book. And I'd been teaching like 17 years, and this kid just threw me for a loop. I'd been teaching in 100% poverty. I switched to obviously a school on the west side, so you can tell. I mean, it's completely different. It's like going from another planet. I had no idea like what's a PTA. Like I still have,
Meaning, just for our listeners,
Yeah.
the community that we live in, the east side of town, has more poverty and more hardship. So
Yes,
the schools
absolutely.
on that end of town are just dealing with much different issues than the schools on the west side of town.
Oh, you meant the west side of Detroit.
Yeah.
Okay, I thought you meant the
Yes.
west side of the state.
Pasco.
No,
Okay, okay.
I'm talking like
Yeah.
East side Pasco, West side
Yes,
Pasco.
yeah.
And I was like
Yeah.
minivans, soccer moms. I was like, I have
Yeah, so west side is more like she was back
But
in
a lot more
suburbia.
little T trauma, I bet.
Yes, a lot more covert, a lot more. We were dealing with a lot more autism, a lot more of that kind of stuff. Also, just different kinds of poor parenting habits. As far as like overcompensating over, freaking out over, did my kids get popcorn when your child is suffering because you and your husband scream at each other in front of them. So it was just completely different. So this little boy entered my class the second year I'd been there, and the school building was only about 6 years old, so it was a new building. Everything was just different for me, and I moved there because I had so much secondary trauma, like you were talking about, dealing with poverty constantly.
When you don't have control over it, and your
Yes.
heart pours out to the people in the community
And
you
I
work with.
threw so much money into my teaching, and it became very much a codependency kind of thing where it was like me and my kids against the world, and they're going to have everything they need. And I wrote about it because it was kind of a turning point for me when my mentor sat me down. We were out to breakfast, and I was just bawling my eyes out to her. And she's like, okay, so now that we've healed the behavioral addictions, you're abusing yourself with your job. So I'm like, oh, and she was like, so now this is the next layer of healing that you don't have to always be teaching in poverty to feel like you're a good teacher. And what's it going to be like if you can go home and not worry if your students are eating, or if, like, I was already planning for the next school year, right? So I was like, okay, this little boy's going to need dry shampoo. He's going to need clean undies every day. He's going to need, and I'm thinking that because that was my life.
Those blue eyes?
No, that was before I moved to the school.
Oh, okay.
So that next year was just a gift. I apologize. That wasn't very clear as mud. So basically, so I'd been at this new school. It was going really well. My children had just entered high school, end of middle school. And I was just kind of learning them again, like learning how to, because I literally, the sicker I got in behavioral addictions, I got so high on my own dopamine that I lost track of time. I still have very large chunks of time that I have no idea what happened. Or I would be on a trip with my family and so distracted that I was there, but I wasn't there. So that is something I can never, ever get back. So in therapy, she was like, go through pictures, and which is even more painful because I was freaking there.
Yeah.
But I wasn't. And when you actually detox off of dopamine, you detox it like you're coming off of an opiate, like you're coming off of heroin. So I did the same thing as I went through withdrawal. I shook. I threw up.
Dang.
Like, it's so real, and it's your own, your addiction is in your brain. It's not like you're shooting up. So people became like my dealer. So I had to stay away from certain people.
Oh, weird.
Because I was addicted to them, And so it's just like cutting everything out of your life and starting over. Well, unfortunately, I closed my eyes when my children were 4 and 2, and I opened them again and they were teenagers. And so I lost their entire childhood really to my addictions. And so I had to repair that, and I had to, most of the time, shake hands with my regret every single day. And
James, how is that hitting you? Is it okay if I ask?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. I feel like there's some parallels in what Wisty has shared in different areas.
Well, I mean, my situation, I am divorced. I have 4 children, and so I get like partial custody of them. No, I also have similar regret of like all the time I've missed. I'm just thinking of like my love addiction to social media. Like when times were good and we were on vacation, I would be stuck on my phone,
posting it so people could see how cool you were. I know. But the greatest thing about healing is when we meet people that we resonate with, and that we that I get it factor. And I think
it helps melt that shame and normalize us and just see humanity that in others. Yeah.
Right. And I think the greatest tragedy we have is acting like we have it all together.
Oh, right.
It makes me so irate. That is when people, and in fact, my company, Simple and Deep, I founded that because of the fact that I was tired of women who didn't want to deal with their crap. So Brene Brown has a quote that says, "Stop working your shit out on other people." And that is why I started the
Brene quote.
I know Brene, she's so rad. But it's the idea that I am tired of watching people bleed out on other people and saying it's the other person's fault.
Or this is the way I am. It's just the way it is.
And I'm like, no, you're totally broken. But the thing is, it's through our brokenness. Like, people in recovery are the most holy people I've ever met.
Yeah.
Because they are like, I suck. I'm a beautiful disaster. I might not get it right, but at least I'm real and I'm here right now, and this is who I am. Right?
Well, and I'm sorry.
No, it's just the truth. And my God, teachers are the worst. And so I thought that I was going to found my company for teachers. And I was like, oh no, there's no freaking way, because they're way too into their Pinterest. They're way too into their Astrobrite paper and their teacher outfits on Instagram. It makes me want to throw up. And I've been to the point where I'm like, I'm always getting in trouble for saying what I think. And everyone's like, oh my God. And I'm like, you know what? You were all freaking thinking it. And so the thing is that I will often be the one that stands up in a meeting and says something, and then everyone's like, oh my God, I can't believe she said that. I'm like, you were just saying it like 10 minutes ago, but you're a coward and won't say it with me.
I think there's so much passive aggressiveness in American culture, and it really is.
It's gross.
It's hard to just feel like you can be, to me, being direct is being kind. And certainly that can be softened.
You know what it's called? In my life, one, I've decided that people that tell the truth are unicorns, because we all live in a land of My Little Ponies. Like, it's like, we're all like, oh, this is how I love people. I tell the truth.
They weren't nice to me.
Yeah. And I'm like, you know what? Suck it up, buttercup.
Well, and
like, that's life.
Yeah, and I remember for a long time people would consider if you told the truth and you were like a diva or something. But yeah, like the work that I've done, and then just like the culture we've tried to create in this podcast, it's like almost we're so far removed from phoniness, and we're so like non-negotiable about transparency and vulnerability that now I have like an allergic reaction to people who, and I was
that's
actually
a good way to say allergic, like my facial expression when I think about it.
And you're just like, okay, you stay in your phony world. Like I'm gonna throw up. I need to leave.
For me, it's a visceral reaction, and the hard part for me, and actually in some ways, going back to Fred, is the fact that Fred was exactly the same with everyone.
Yeah.
He was, there was no, and the reason I don't like the movie with Tom Hanks is he made him slightly creepy. And there's a lot of other facets to it, but I would definitely recommend the Morgan Neville documentary called Won't You Be My Neighbor. That is what I would highly recommend for anyone that really wants to know Fred Rogers, because it really showcases the intentionality of Fred. And one of the things that really grabbed me, going back to Blue Eyes, is the fact that, talking about intentionality, I had no idea how to help him. He was so complex and what we call disorganized. He had reactive attachment disorder, and his dad had just got out of jail for substance abuse, and I believe it was possession. His mother was pregnant with another man's child, and she was about to, drop in like a month. And he came in, chest bumping everybody, acting like a little mini Eminem rapper, and yelling at everybody, reenacting domestic violence. He had a little girl that he fixated on in my classroom, and at recess he would throw her up against a wall and tell her, "You can't be with anybody else but me." And his mom would say, well, he doesn't remember that. He was 2. And I was like, his body remembers it. The Body Keeps the Score. Great book on trauma.
I sat right next to him.
Oh my gosh, did he breathe and everything?
He looked at me.
And
I was frozen. Yeah.
Wait, who are we talking about? What's his name?
Bessel van der Kolk.
Yeah,
he wrote The Body Keeps the Score.
Oh.
He's a
Great
trauma
book.
expert.
Is he like a Dreamy McDreamy or something? Okay.
He's an old white man
But it's just the idea
from
that
Germany.
but the thing is that what he
He's
did
like My
is,
Feeling About Brene or something. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly. It's
Exactly. You
one of those
got
people.
it.
But it's one of the things that he did was he really explained that body is stored in our trauma is stored in the
that we're
body.
one
Yeah.
organism. It seems like a silly thing that we have to explain. We think that the mind and the body are separate,
I know.
but we're not. We are one organism.
And our
So
fight, flight.
your emotions, your
Yeah.
stress,
Like
your
zombies
fight,
will
flight,
eat your brain and your
cortisol,
body.
They'll affect your body as well. And you have to pay attention then to your body. It's giving you messages. It's giving you signals.
Yes. So for instance, I had my gallbladder out this last year, and it was a complete cluster of awful. Before that was pancreatitis, as well as publishing a book in the middle. But the point is, it showed up in every way. It showed up on my skin. It showed up in my fingernails. It showed up like your body is talking to you, but we ignore it all the time.
For sure.
So anyways, I tried to explain this to her, but she is not, she just didn't get it. So, I was trying to I was desperate. So I'm in therapy still, working on my own attachment theory, and trying to gain, because what happens is when we have insecure attachment, we need someone with secure attachment that we borrow from. So a baby borrows from their mother's nervous system. So a child is fussy, we pick them up, we soothe them, right? We calm them, we rock them, we meet their needs, and it becomes this love exchange cycle.
Yeah.
Well, what happens with ambivalent is that the parent isn't always they're not always consistent. Then you have an avoidant parent. It's just going to meet the needs basically and not do a lot of extra cuddling, talking, cooing, all of that stuff to their child. And then disorganized, that means that a parent is being terrorized or they are terrorizing the child. So what happens is all 3 of those babies don't understand real love.
Yeah.
They don't know how to receive it, and they don't know what real love is. It's confusing to them. So with a disorganized child like Blue Eyes, he bounced between both because they're trying to figure out how to survive in the world. So one day he would be super almost manipulative towards me. Like, I love you, Mrs. Edwards. How can I help you, Mrs. Edwards? And the next day he's like, F you. Like, so, and it's so confusing. And so what that does to my attachment system is it throws me into back into anxious attachment, because when we are stressed, we're going to regress back to how we learned love. So I start looking at it as I'm a crap teacher because he can't learn when I can't figure out what he needs. And so it becomes this vicious cycle. So what we see with children like him or others is they're put in the hall. We have to call the school counselor. The school counselor comes down and works with them for 5 minutes and says, okay, now we've worked on this. So he's going to come back to class. And the teacher's like, I hate him. Right? Like we start to have resentment towards this child that we can't teach because now he's back. And then it becomes this vicious cycle. So the thing is, though, we never want to look at the fact that we are the problem.
Yeah.
We are the adult. We are the wise adult in a classroom or as a parent. And if we do not unpack why we react the way we do to certain things and triggers.
Having emotional intelligence.
Yes. And just the capability to hold space for a child. My mother, because she had not dealt with her own emotional pain, would jump into my chaos. So now it's no longer about what I need. It's about meeting her emotional needs.
Yeah.
We came home one time and she'd been watching our son and he was 2. And both of them were crying. She has mascara running down her face and he's sobbing. And my husband and I were like, dude, like, he's 2. Like, how did you? And she's like, he told me he wants me to go home. And I'm like, Mom. But it's like, it's the idea that, like, she took that, like, he's 2.
Yeah.
Like, he's probably going to tell you he wants goldfish crackers in a minute. But, like, if you don't have that emotional intelligence to hold that space, you take everything on.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh my God, I'm a crap dad because my daughter's. So my counselor actually said to me once, every time Ben, me and my nose struggles, it's not because you were an addict. And I was like, oh. She goes, he is going to change. He is going to suck things up. He's going to have to make his own mistakes. But it's not because you failed him every single time.
No.
But as an ambivalently attached person, everything is our fault.
Yeah.
And we're always looking for ways to make it better. So with him, with Blue Eyes, I was so desperate that I was like, well, I'll try Mr. Rogers because that's what we had when we were growing up.
Oh, yeah.
And so I had remembered the Crayon Factory. And so I turned it on YouTube and started playing it as a literally like a last ditch resort. Like I was like, I'm going to sink. And this is so incredibly uncool because I moved to this school because I wasn't going to sink. And now this kid, this little blue-eyed boy is going to take me out. And
the magic of Mr. Rogers. What happened?
It literally started rewiring their brains. So he did not buy in right away. And in fact, I have a whole part in my book where he came up to me and he was like, Mr. Rogers is for babies. And I went to my counselor and I was like, oh my God. And she goes, Wisty, he doesn't have to like Mr. Rogers. Give him the option of not liking something. Because he has no control in his life.
Yeah.
And she was like, she goes, but Mr. Rogers loved kids like him.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay. And she was like, no, Wisty, remember, you're rewiring his brain. That's the goal. It's not just to change his behavior.
Yeah, new mental pathways.
That is where we are so screwed up with education.
Yeah.
Is that we think that we are going to, and that's why I absolutely hate things like make your day and zones of regulation and all these things, because what it does is, yes, I love that they can say, but it's super complex. So Fred has a quote that's my absolute favorite. He has many, but one of them is deep and simple is far more essential than shallow and complex. And even zones of regulation, for instance, although it's a great thing, there's way too many choices for children. And so that's complex. So it's okay for them to say, I'm mad.
Yeah.
I'm angry. So getting them to say that, or I don't like it. Okay. And does that mean that, what do I have to do? I don't have to do anything with that. It's just their opinion.
Yeah.
Right? Like, but boundaries feel very weird to people who don't have them. So when my counselor would say to me, oh, I'm sorry. When I said, it was really hard to get a schedule change and blah, 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 blah. And I want her to like jump in to my chaos. And she's like, I'm sorry. And I just sat there and waited. And I felt like she'd slapped me. Right? So we start watching Mr. Rogers and things just start changing. Things start changing in massive ways. One, my mentor had said to me, before you watch Mr. Rogers, because I said, I'm just going to put on Mr. Rogers. I think that's what I'm going to do. When I was crying to her, and she goes, okay, but can you make me a promise? And I said, what's that? And she said, I want you to not multitask while you're watching Mr. Rogers. And I said, Okay. And she goes, no, seriously, I want you to sit your butt down and I want you to receive what God and Mr. Rogers have to tell you. And I was like, okay. And she goes, can you do that? And I said, absolutely. So I made a commitment to myself because I was absolutely desperate to reach him, that from that moment on, we were going to watch it every day. And I was going to pull up one of their chairs in front of the screen, and I was going to turn my phone off or put it on my desk so I could not see it.
Yeah.
This is a really big thing for a teacher too, because any little minute that you get, there's something that you have to be doing
For sure.
ahead of time.
Yeah. And I decided this is going to be my therapy during the day.
I was going to say, because did it actually do a little bit of inner child healing for you?
Regulate you.
It's like a super like unbelievable ways that God showed up and healed me through it. Every single time I turned it on, it was a miracle. And what's later now, knowing people who were very, very close to Fred, and I'm not talking about people that worked with him every day, but the rogue friends that he brought into his life where he could really share his heart versus the people that thought they knew him, completely different. They will tell me the things that I recognized really came from God. For instance, yes, and that's how I start the book is, if I can show you a little bit.
Yeah.
It started with, I didn't ride a trolley to get here. I pulled my chair to the middle of the room and faced the screen. The overhead lights are dimmed with only the soft glow of the fish tank illuminating the calm down quarter. When I had put the fish tank together, the girl in the pet store looked at the photo on my phone and said, oh, I think my mom liked that guy. That guy being Mr. Rogers. It was important to me to replicate his fish tank to add more comfort in my classroom. And since it's become a space where the autistic child sits in front for breaks and others soothe their sadness, watching Mr. Rogers' neighborhood with my kindergartners is a non-negotiable part of our day. It's garnished miracles and changed my life. As they eat their Ritz crackers, I take a deep breath. Breathing deeply keeps me present and grounded in the moment. Every day I pull up this little chair to watch as a gift to myself and to them. And I invite in anything that love wants to teach me. Where some teachers can see 30 minutes as a break to prepare for the next activity, I'm making an intentional choice to sit down with them, to stop. It comes from a deep place inside me that misses a time when the world wasn't as violent, fast-paced, sophisticated, and insecure. Do you remember that? There was a time when people understood the power of a written letter and an intentional conversation, and when families actually sat down and talked at a dinner table. I miss being a little girl. I miss my grandmother who made me feel safe as she snuggled up to me and read to me and stroked my hair. I knew I was the only one that mattered in that moment in her eyes and in her presence. And in her love, I wasn't afraid, but safe and warm. She represented a pause in my life and a safe space. So returning to the neighborhood is about coming home to the children that we once were, in a place where time stands still and we watch a kind man in a cardigan sweater. And it's my turn, and it's my return to the real me that I'd lost along the way of trying to understand my own self-worth, trust, and security. Perhaps we abandoned ourselves so long ago due to being left alone with all that we didn't understand as children. I've learned so many things that I didn't know. Learning and discovering the truth will always set us free. The neighborhood is where I've come back to my own sweet baby girl inside and sit with all of my own stories of harm and heartache. It's time to be intentional. It's time to pause, to focus our attention, and to grow into love.
Beautiful.
Yeah. So
that was beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I opted to call 3 things. So there's a couple things that we always do. Mr. Rogers is non-negotiable. We never go potty or get a drink during Mr. Rogers. It's absolutely not okay.
Yeah.
We pee before we go. Or we wait until the end. We can lay down during Mr. Rogers on the carpet. We never get to do that otherwise. And I pull 3 lucky duck sticks with their numbers on it, and they get to sit around me. And the people that sit around me do not lay down, because what I do is I attune to them by touching them. And teachers are way too afraid of touch. And so what happens is we don't touch children at all. And COVID killed me. I remember my principal was like, Wisty, I have to tell you, you can't hug them. And I started to bawl. And I was like, this is my personal hell, and I'm about ready to die because I have to touch children. Yeah. And so I touch their hair. I rub their back.
And honestly, I still talk about my time at this school because it was so magical. When you get I got a minimum of 10 to 15 hugs a day. Oh, yeah. It really does something to you. It's an addictive, and in a beautiful way.
Yes. And I call the place in front of my knees is the hot seat. And to fast forward through this whole process with him, with Blue Eyes, he was there almost every day. And what I would do is he would come and sit in front of me. And then I was able to put my hands in his hair and attune to him and rub his back. And I would often take my fingers and just rub his forehead while he was watching. And in the story where he said, Mr. Rogers is for babies, I gave him the option. So the next day I went to school and I was like, I can do this. I'm going to totally work him. And so I called him over and he was like, what? And the thing he liked to say is, I don't care, as loud as he could to scare all the other kids. And then, it would be like a pin could drop and all the kids would be terrified. And he'd be like so happy that he had terrorized everybody because then he felt powerful. So I said, well, remember yesterday when you told me you didn't like Mr. Rogers? And he was like, yeah. And I was like, well, you don't have to like Mr. Rogers. And he was stunned by it. And so, the timer went off and people started cleaning up and he just kind of sat there. And I was like, so Mr. Rogers loved kids like you. And I would really love for you to join us with Mr. Rogers. I know you think it's really stupid, but we're going to watch it today. So you can either sit here and just be chill, or you can join us on the carpet and watch Mr. Rogers with us. And that's just going to be how it is. And of course, inside, I'm just dying because I'm not at that place where I can really hold space for myself. And I'm like, this is stupid. He's going to freaking go light something on fire. You know what I'm saying? And slowly, he came over and joined us in the hot seat. He came to his spot and he was like, this is last time when King Friday did it. Like, he bought it, but he needed to know that I would love him if he didn't love it.
Yeah. So it was his choice. He was still in control.
Right.
Yeah.
And then we had times where just, Fred would say things like, he would point at the camera and he would say things like, I love you. And I would cry. Like, I would just sit there and be like, oh my gosh. Or he would say, and the cool thing, the other ways that I felt like God really showed up in that was the fact that he would say something that I needed to say to my kids, but I hadn't had the words that morning. Yeah. And it would just show up. Or like even something as simple as we're doing push, pull, go. And that day they visit 2,000 dominoes. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, it was ridiculous.
The synchronicity.
Yes. And it was like all of a sudden, and I talk about that in the book, but I say, it was like Mr. Rogers and I were partnering together as teachers. We were co-teaching together. Yeah. And so I stopped doing stupid, insignificant, complex things with kids. Like, I stopped, so people would be like, oh, well, Wisty does Mr. Rogers. And I'm like, he's not just mine. So I see that in my building as well as everywhere. Like, they'll do all these programs and they're like, so what are you doing? And I'm like, Fred, that's it. And I don't add anything to it. So if someone's across the room and they're having a meltdown, I'm like, oh, so we need to look, and they'll go, and listen. I'm like, yeah. Like, I'll just say something that Fred says, and then they internalize it.
Yeah.
Right.
Something I'm relating to, and I'm not sure if you might as well, but we both grew up in homes where, like, I had a blended family. Your parents were divorced, and so you don't have that like nuclear family. And then the time frame too that was, we were the minority, right? And I was a small community, so I feel like television and shows became my examples of what, like, what are families, or what does it look like for a parent to show up more regularly or have the capacity to do that.
And that's what was important
exactly.
to him.
Yeah.
And I think that was something
you got to actually show this is what it's like to have a loving, caring adult in your life who's consistently there for you. Yeah.
Yeah. And he said, things like, how I wish that every child would know how important they are and that they would have one lap, one place. And that is what he wanted to establish. So he was ordained as a Presbyterian minister, which was incredibly unorthodox because they ordained him to be a pastor to children on TV. So they were his congregation. But instead of, he did not want to be exclusive using, religious terminology.
I don't think he ever did he?
No, just a little tiny bit at the beginning when he was still trying to figure things out. But by the end, anytime he talked about anything that was about God, he would say love. So simple things like 1, 4, 3. So I is 1 letter, love is 4 letters, U is 3 letters, so 1, 4, 3.
7.
1, 4, 3. So he would say that, and it meant I love you. But then also, he loved the fact that he weighed 143 pounds forever. So,
oh, geez, he's light.
Yeah, he was super, but he was like 6 foot. So, like, he was very, very thin. So, if you see his sweaters, they're tiny.
Yeah.
But it's the idea that, so my kids, for instance, my goal with them is, even during COVID, we never missed the neighborhood. So, for 4 straight years, we've watched 180 days, sometimes twice a day with covert or, the cohorts or whatever, AB. But we've watched it in order as well. So I'm now good friends with David Newell, who is Mr. McFeely. And so we will write to him on the 100th day of school. And he'll text back and be like, speedy delivery to my neighborhood.
Hey, that was the mailman, right?
Yes,
okay.
And he's actually sent speedy deliveries to
That
our
is
school.
so VIP.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
It is. And honestly, when we went out to dinner with him in Pittsburgh, my son and I did, he was like, Mom, this is like spending time with Fred. And I'm like, it is. It is like spending time with Fred.
I'm so excited to start showing Priya more Fred Rogers.
You
And
need
I
to.
honestly, I
It's
tried
not-
before, and I wish I would have tried harder because I was like trying to figure out where I could stream it. But
Right,
yeah,
and
I'm
everybody's like
excited.
all about Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood, and there's a couple things. One, it's animation, and Fred did not believe in commercializing to children ever, and so that is absolutely not in the same,
Vein.
right?
Yeah.
But also, my biggest fear is that we are losing him, and children need an attuned adult male
Yeah.
in their life that's not anything but who he is. So he is an actual representation of a secure base. So he used the model of Jesus as far as like doing the neighborhood of make-believe was like a parable, right? And then he would explain the parable like Jesus did, or he would leave it out there in the middle of nowhere and say, you know what, we're just going to keep working with this and see where you take it, and I think the thing that's really changed for me is I will not tell children lies, even if they think it's funny and cute. So I used to say things like the sprinklers were cameras, like to get them to behave, right? So now I pride myself on always telling them the truth, and things like grown-ups come back. Why? Because they want to, which I got from Fred. And the thing is that really helps when you have a deadbeat dad. Why isn't he coming back? I guess he doesn't want to, and that's really selfish. And you know what? If I were your mommy or daddy, I would always want to be near you.
Yeah.
And sometimes when grown-ups are being selfish, it has nothing to do with the children that love them. And it's okay for you to be super mad about that.
Yeah.
And they're like, okay. Or like, it's in the book as well, but I have a day where we were doing math, and children, you can attest to this, they never have the right timing. And it's usually super either humbling or it just derails everything, right? As well as a good fart on the carpet. Like you'll have this great moment when you're teaching and someone lets out this huge fart, and then it's like, we're done. We're just done because
Everyone's broken into laughter. We can't regroup.
Nope.
No.
And it reverberates through the whole room, and it's awesome. And
I love those moments.
Yeah.
You were that kid.
Yeah,
you
you
were
were
totally that kid.
Or you were the kid that couldn't stop laughing, and I'd be like, seriously.
I was the farter. Yeah.
But I we had a moment where this little girl was like, "Is Mr. Rogers dead?" And I'm like, ba-bump, like right in the middle of math, and I was like, "So here's that moment
Yeah.
where I get to either be honest and be like," and people that knew Fred were like, please explain to them that he is not magic, that he cannot see them, because children would come up to him at dinner when he was out in public and they'd be like, my dog died. And he'd be like, okay. And so he was like, they think I know them. And I'm not a magical thing like Santa Claus. I'm not Big Bird. Carol Spinney wanted to come on the neighborhood, and he said, okay, well, I need you to come into the neighborhood house and I'm going to have you take off your costume. And he said, I can't do that. Jim Henson won't let me do that. And I don't believe in that. And he goes, then you can never be in the neighborhood house because we believe in the distinction between real and make-believe. And so I will ask children, this book is about unicorns. Are unicorns real or make-believe? And they're like, make-believe.
I mean, I feel like they might be real.
No, I
Go
know,
ahead.
right, exactly. I wish they were. But it's the idea that he makes it so clear.
Uh-huh.
So you must have answered that question.
I
honestly.
did. I answered it. And I thank you for making sure I didn't derail. But basically, I said to them, yes, Mr. Rogers is dead.
Yeah.
And she said, my mommy said he's dead. And I said, he did. He died in 2003. And I said, and he died
Dang,
because...
is that long ago?
Yes. And it's unfortunate, like 20 some years without Fred on this planet is
20 exactly. Yeah.
Yes, this year. And actually, the very first day I ever held my book was the anniversary of his death, 20 years. But I digress. So basically, I talked about, he had cancer in his tummy, and they were like, oh, my grandma had cancer. And I was like, yeah, does everybody die of cancer? No, not everybody dies of cancer. And I was like, but the cool thing is that he left us over 900 episodes. So
Yeah.
every time we see, and of course kids are like, but we saw him yesterday. Like they think it just happened because they're all about being in the moment.
Yeah.
Right? And I'm like, and I get that.
Yeah.
I get that. And I know that that's a huge loss, isn't it? And I said, but guess what? he says at the end of every episode, you know, and I'll be back when the day is new and I'll have more ideas for you and we'll have things we want to talk about. Right? So I will be back. And that's what children always need from people that love them, is that I will be back for you. And so today when we watch Mr. Rogers, he's going to come through the door and he's going to smile and he's going to talk to you. And that's what's so cool, is he left that for you because he loved children. And so they're like, okay. And then it's over. Like, they don't even think about it anymore.
Yeah.
But
what a good way to explain that, and to, it's still leaving them with the sense of like, well, he's always there for you. He still is there for you.
For sure.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that is really powerful because of the fact that Fred Rogers had his own, when I did my research, I came across his traumas. And David Newell, Mr. McFeely, was there when I was researching. He was dropping things off. And when I went out to him, I started to talk about Blue Eyes and I started just sobbing. And I was like, this is so stupid. You're sobbing to Mr. McFeely. And he like just pointed to the chair and he was like, come sit down. So I was like, and so we talked and I said, I just found Fred's trauma. And I said, is it okay if I write about that? And he was like, well, yeah, because he was real.
Yeah.
And so I realized as I was going through my process of reading his papers, which are so amazing, because some of them are warped from the water from when he was at the Y swimming every morning, and I saw his doodles in the corner and his thoughts and his feelings and the questions he was asking himself. But
what a deep connection you got to have with him through your process of writing and researching.
And I was there for a week, pretty much by myself, with myself and the archivist and a couple other people. But I was in a room by myself and it was raining. And I always feel like God shows up when it rains. And so I opened the windows and it was just Fred and I for hours and hours, like 6 hours a day. So I felt like, so the reason I started crying too, I was thinking about Blue Eyes, but David Newell asked me, did you ever meet Fred? And I said, no, I never got to. And then I started crying and I said, but I think I just did. And it was just so humbling because through the whole process, I would just ask myself, okay, I'm just writing this book as if I could still send it just to him. Right. And it was really about that and about bringing that awareness back. Like, so I feel as though Fred was radical. If you watch that documentary, like I said, you're going to see that he was super radical in his thinking. He was at the very beginning of attachment theory in 1969. He worked with some of the leading people in child development. Dr. Spock, Eric Erickson, like some of the major people. And the thing is that he was at the beginning of it. Well, now we've proven it with the brain. So I've been able to say to someone like David Newell, every time Fred looked into the camera and he attuned, he was healing the brains of kids. Yeah. And he was like, is that right? And I said, yeah, you guys were right the whole time.
Yeah.
And so being able to say that to him is a gift, right? Like it's being able to say, thank you for believing in something that wasn't easy.
Yeah. Well, and I love what you alluded to earlier about what did he say?
Simple and deep.
Simple and deep. Yeah. That I feel like is so foundational of just where like healing exists, because
everyone wants a fast fix.
Yeah, he got it right, and then also a lot of people want to try to overcomplicate it when it's like. Everything that you're talking about right now is like, and everything that apparently Fred Rogers stood for, like resonates with what we've been talking about, and like our own discoveries and like mental health, and it's just. And I love. Thank you so much for coming to the podcast, Misty, and for sharing your story, because you've just woven that same ethos that we believe in, and that it reignited my excitement for Fred Rogers. Yeah, I'm gonna show my kids too.
And
then how it's applied to your real life.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think it's one of those things where people are like, oh, well, so you wrote it's not a biography about Fred. It's about the fact that, and I shared that before we started, that Fred did die of stomach cancer. He had avoidant attachment. And so he grew up with a hypochondriac mother, but also one of the richest families in Pennsylvania. So when the Lindbergh baby was taken, they thought he might be on a list, right? So like he went to school in a limousine, he was ostracized, he was fat, he was bullied. And so he always believed that he never wanted people to feel that again. So he said, whenever I encounter anybody, so this is something you might not know. Fred Rogers individually answered every letter he ever received. And most of them by hand.
Wow.
So we have very little of those letters in the archive. We have the letters children wrote him. But what they would do is they would take your letter from when you were 3, 4, 5, and they would put them together. So when Fred was answering, he'd be like, do you remember when you were 3 and you gave away your blanket? Do you remember when you went to kindergarten and you did this?
All tracked.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so that was, and one of the only times that people saw him super, super ticked off was when a bunch of mail got thrown away. And he was so irate.
Yeah.
He also would get angry over things like people saying, don't cry.
Yeah.
So all of those things. And I guess there were things like asking Lynn Johnson, who took these beautiful pictures that I was able to license. I said, what would you do if you could have one more hour near Fred Rogers? And she said, I would just sit in his presence and be quiet. Because that was his gift, is that he brought ease and comfort.
Yeah.
And I think that is who we are called to be. We all can be ease and comfort for people that we encounter.
For sure.
And that is my hope. And what's really beautiful is Blue Eyes he comes to my classroom every day, and we've had some incredible moments. I don't want to give away the end of the book, but he was the very first person that I gave my book to for my advanced copies. I took it to school, and the book is dedicated to him. And so I was able to... it says, for Blue Eyes, you changed everything. And he even said to my son who was visiting, I don't know why she loves me so much. And that's when I knew something was working, right? Because it's like, he could come in and just be a total jerk to me. And I'm like, yay, good talk. Have a good day. And then he walks out and then he comes back and he's like, and I'll say, is there anything you want to talk to me about? And he's like, I just need to tell you I'm really sorry. And I'm like, okay. And I'm like, is there anything you can do that will will make you lose my love? And he's like, no. And I'm like, exactly.
Yeah.
And when he was angry with his mom, guess who he acted angry towards? Me, because he knew that he was safe enough to show me that. And I wouldn't stop loving him. So what I did is, if he stops coming to the class and I know he's super triggered, which is going to happen after long vacations. Or like you said, like when you're sharing kids, they're going back and forth to different houses. Well, now dad has a new girlfriend and I don't feel important, which is what happened to him. And he doesn't feel important in either house. We have a lot of, and that's, I think, something I'm really passionate about for my next book, perhaps, is the invisible child.
Yes.
And it's not necessarily just being ignored, but it's the child that has to go between different families. And all of a sudden, I don't have a family of my own, or I was adopted, or I was neglected, or whatever it might be. What does that feel like? And I realized that I'm a teacher, but I'm actually mothering certain children. So I have become a surrogate mother to Blue Eyes because of the fact that his mother cannot cope.
Well, there's such an important role and opportunity there in teaching to provide that and to be that loving, caring adult that when I would talk about adverse childhood trauma and the effects of that in an educator type of role, the biggest gift that you have isn't to teach them their ABCs and their 1, 2, 3s.
Yeah.
It's that you get to mitigate trauma. You get to be this balancing force. Like, how badass is that?
It's super badass. And
it's so badass.
Is that Fred is non-negotiable during my day. I don't care if we get to reading. I don't care if we get to math. I don't care if we get to science. And so every time we have a short day, the first thing that's a priority to me is, where is the neighborhood? I need 28 minutes. And if we don't have 28 minutes, we're not doing anything else but that. And so my kids are always like, so when are we watching Mr. Rogers? I'm like, we're doing it right away because we have the assembly at the end of the day. Like, they know we will not miss it.
Yeah.
And you asked before we started, and the questions you sent me, why did I become a teacher? And I think this is, I know we're probably at the end, but the thing is that I didn't know why I had become a teacher. And as I started to study my story, which I'm very passionate about, we study everything but our own story. So if we go back through our story, and that's part of my business, Simple and Deep, is the fact that it's not only just to educate women about what is attachment, but it's also engaging story. So what does it look like? Our story has characters, themes, plot twists. Tragedy is what moves our story forward, because otherwise it doesn't move, right? It's just the same. So if we don't study our own story, we're not going to see the patterns and the themes and the contours of it. So one of the contours of my story is that I've always been a truth teller, and in the fact that I've been so bold that I usually am told to be quiet. So then I'm also scapegoated. So I'll be the healthiest one that says, hey, what's up with that? And then they go, oh, Wisty, you need to leave. You're too much. So that has been the theme of my life. Like people are like, come on in. And then they're like, oh, wait, you have big opinions. You need to leave. And the thing is that I really want women who have been ostracized to find wholeness and healing through what I do with my business. So I started studying my own story. And one of those was, one of the questions that I'd always asked myself was, why did I become a teacher? And I did not become a teacher because I had this Oprah Winfrey moment of like, oh my God, this person saved my soul. I became a teacher because I had total shit teachers along the way. And I knew intrinsically that I deserved better. And I had no idea why I knew that. So as I went back and started to write out, and the thing is we need to write our stories. We need to physically write them with pen and paper because it does something with our brain. So it integrates the trauma. It helps us build neural pathways. So as I wrote out the story, which is in the book, I came back to a story in 3rd grade where I had a horrible teacher and I had just had a brain injury and she would always pick at me. And so it was the day that I finally told her, I hate you, right before recess. And it was like silence and everybody, then the bell rang and everybody just like ran because they were like, she's going to die. Right. And the woman couldn't look at me and she sat down at her desk seething, but she couldn't say another word to me. Well, she told me, put your head down. And then she went to her desk and I remember watching. And it was that moment I realized that is when I became a teacher because I stood up for a child that was being ostracized or a child that was being singled out as less than, when it wasn't true. And so only when I went back through my own story of developmental traumas was I able to find my why. And that is so important.
Yeah, what a beautiful journey.
Right. And so that is, it's not something that always makes sense, but it does. And then when other things have happened lately, a paraeducator said, oh my gosh, aren't you so worried about that? Why is that happening? I said, well, that just fits the theme of my life. That's just what happens with me, right? So I know we're at the end, right? So if people are interested in the book.
Let me display it.
Yes. Beautiful cover.
It actually releases September 26th, but you can go to my website. Again, it's Wysteria Edwards, Wysteria, Edwards.com. You can go and actually what I would suggest is going to, there's a page about the book and you can do a pre-order, but I also have a what is your attachment style quiz that literally takes 60 seconds. Yes. And by doing that, you get like this customized report telling you all about your attachment style, how to kind of work with that. And then it also opts you in so that you can get the book for free. So with that, you just pay the shipping and handling on it. And then there's also an opt-in for the companion course that will be coming out as well. So if anything, if you don't feel like it's something that you could benefit from, please get something for someone else because I think
I am so excited
important
to get a few copies for some friends.
Absolutely. And then I'm going to be able to sign those copies when they come off the press in the next couple of weeks. So thank you so
Please
much.
take the opportunity to learn from everything that Wysteria Edwards has shared today.
This has been a beautiful conversation.
Such a beautiful conversation.
Yeah, and I'm excited to get to edit and hear it all over again.
Yes. Oh,
Thank you. Yes.
Please check her out. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe to Delightfully Dysfunctional. Thank you again so much for joining us.
Absolutely.
It was
Thanks for having me.
wonderful.
Absolutely.
Enjoy the rest of your day.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
That was